And start recording. Good evening, everyone. My name is F.A. Osarin. I am a doula, birth worker, and a student midwife based in New York City, Brooklyn. I am the founder of Doula Chronicles. Doula Chronicles Reproductive Futurism is a virtual gathering in honor of the work of Lorretta and Octavia Butler. We will be following in their footsteps on dreaming and creating what a better future around what pregnancy and birth can look like. As birth workers, we're on the front lines of this maternal health crisis. We witness near misses, mistreatment from healthcare staff, and obstetric violence. Grieving and mourning is a part of our work, but so is creating anew where it didn't exist before. This is a space to share with your comrades what the future can look like. As said by one of our favorite elder midwives, Jenny Joseph, we're in the business of saving lives. Today, we are meeting with Jillian Lopina. Did I say that right, Jillian? Choosing a donor sperm for LGBTQ plus folks and more. Jillian uses she, her pronouns as a queer doula, photographer, and passionate advocate of birth and midwifery. She grew up in Northern Virginia with early exposure to and interest in the birth community. While sitting in on her mother's work, teaching childbirth education classes and lactation consultant. She is committed to sharing knowledge with fellow LGBTQ plus families on the many different paths to pregnancy. As a photographer, she documents births, birth workers, and families. Jillian created a podcast and portrait project called Working Birth, which explores the beautiful and intense work that birth professionals do to support families. She served as the president of the Tampa Bay Birth Network, a nonprofit organization, for several years, and is passionate about building community and connecting people and encouraging change. Her goal is to support and advocate for midwifery for all, both internationally and in the U.S. Welcome, Jillian.
Thank you so much. Yes, you said my last name correctly. Yeah, I'm excited to be sharing this information with everyone. We're going to be talking about choosing donor sperm for LGBTQ plus folks and more. I've got a lot of info to share on this, so yeah, I'm excited.
Yes. Quick housekeeping. If you have any questions, put them in the Q&A box and we'll get to them towards the end of the presentation. And the floor is yours.
Awesome. Okay, so there are tons of options. This can be a really, confusing process, especially in the beginning, to figure out like, where do I get sperm? What are the different types? What are the different kinds of banks? There are tons and tons of options. And so this is, helpful for queer couples, any singles with a uterus, or really just anyone who needs sperm to complete their baby making. But I love sharing all the different ways to go about and get sperm and decide what you're going to choose. So we're going to talk about that today. So there are two different types of donors. We have a known donors and unknown donors. So we're going to go into each of those in depth. So known donors, this is somebody who, it could be friends or family. So, a close friend, family member on your partner's side, something like that. And then there's also something called the Known Donor Registry, which is a website that, that helps connect people with local donors. So these are people that agree in advance to provide sperm for, home or clinic insemination, and they know the parents. So you have, with this method, a lot of access to information about the donor, and you also probably have somewhat of a comfort level with them because you're seeing them in person, or maybe you know them, maybe you're close with them. With this, you can choose the level of involvement in the child's life, which is a really neat thing about having a known donor and using a known donor. So, they could be a co-parent, they could be an uncle type figure, they could be not involved at all beyond insemination, but you have the freedom to decide what that might look like for your family. If you are interested in legal protection, you should, look into getting a contract. And so the person to look for with this is called a family law attorney. So when I first went through this process, I did both known donor and unknown donor. And so I'll be sharing more about that. But at first I was like, well, what even kind of lawyer does this kind of thing? Like, who even knows about this? But a family law attorney is somebody who you can search for, and that you can also search for, queer friendly family law attorneys. And you definitely want to look for somebody in your state, because laws do vary pretty widely by state. Something else to think about with, either way, known or unknown donor, is and asking, a family law attorney if second parent adoptions are recommended in your state. It seems ridiculous to have the partner who's not carrying adopt their own child, especially if you're legally married. But sometimes that is what has to happen to ensure full legal protection of, the child having both parents be their legal parents. And so this is especially important in a known donor scenario, so that there's no confusion if anything were to happen to one parent, that, a sperm donor would be considered a legal parent or something. So that's something to consider if you want to go that way. So the cost involved with known donors is anywhere from free, it's mostly free sperm, so you're not paying, if you have a friend or a family member, or even if you're doing the known donor registry, but the legal fees are minimal. So this is, one of the big pros to using a known donor. So with friends or family, it could be close friend, family member, and the cool thing is the possibility for true involvement with the kid. You've also got access to the donor to ask any questions about their medical history, their genealogical history, their personal history, their likes, their dislikes, their personality. Just knowing somebody, can bring a level of comfort. Something you can also think about is doing genetic testing through online companies. We all know about, the ones that go into Ancestry, but you can, the ones that focus a little bit more on medical history, if that's something you're concerned about with a donor, either that or have found through a registry, that's an option to kind of add some extra vetting to the whole known donor process. So the known donor registry is a website that's just an online database. It's free. There may be a small cost to join, but generally I think it's free to access. And it's men and people offering sperm near your location. So this is known as private or directed donation. So you've got lots of options. It lists that people can list different qualities about themselves, and you can search by different things. The pros with this are that it's free. It's close to your location, and it's providing fresh sperm, which can be a valuable thing when you consider how having frozen sperm can kind of make the timelines a little bit tighter, but with fresh sperm, it's a little easier that way. The cons of this, there's no vetting, there's no medical screening, there's little legal protection, and it requires a lot of trust. But frankly, all of these methods require trust. And so that's just something, you can think through. But I have friends that have gone through, each one of these ways to get pregnant and have kids. And I've known people who have used the known donor registry. And so that's definitely an option. So about fresh sperm. So it does live much longer than frozen sperm, both in and out of the body, which is something to consider. So, your window of conception opens up a little bit. It's lower cost. And then the cons are, like I said, it's not washed, not tested. So there's a possibility of disease or of it not working, low motility, and there's less legal protection. So the types of insemination with fresh sperm, and I'll just go into it a little bit, are so ICI, which is known as intracervical insemination. It's also kind of known as intravaginal. I feel like intracervical is kind of a weird term because it is just when the sperm goes into the vagina. It's not through the cervix, but it's close to the cervix. And for this, you could use something like a needleless syringe or this contraceptive aid like the stork, which is like a cervical cap that places the sperm close up near your cervix so it has a chance to swim through up there. This is what's known as the turkey baster method, but you don't actually have to use a turkey baster. You can just use a medical, needleless syringe to shoot it on up there. And this, so intracervical, since it's just going in the vagina, it's not, it's not a lot of, technicalities to it. So you can do this at home unassisted. You could do it at home assisted with a midwife if you'd like, but there's some flexibility with that. And so let me see. Yeah, so before we move on to sperm bank stuff. So, how this would work with the known donor registry, how it can work is you meet up with, connect with a donor on there. You decide to meet up maybe at a point of contact that works for both of you. You obviously are in contact when your fertility window opens up. I'm so glad that the previous presentation was about fertility awareness method and learning all about that, because that's a huge component to getting pregnant this way, of course. And so you would be in contact with the person and maybe meet up in a public place, maybe meet them first anyway. And they would usually provide their specimen in a specimen cup. You would take it and you can either, run home, do it at home, or some people, just do it in the car if you're worried about timelines and whatnot. But fresh sperm does live longer. So that's something to think about, Okay, so with unknown donors, we're getting into sperm banks. So there are two types of donors within the sperm bank world. There's non-anonymous, otherwise known as open identity donors. And these are the people that agree to be contacted after the offspring reaches 18 years old. And then there's anonymous donors who do not agree to have any contact with the offspring at 18. However, it's 2020. DNA testing is widely used, widely available, and is anything really anonymous these days, and especially will anything be anonymous 18 years from now? So it's something to kind of consider that while some banks do still offer the true anonymous option, it may not shake out like that in the end. So I feel like that's something that banks are going to have to be thinking about with the future, but that's something to think about. So more about sperm banks. So the sperm is tested for quality and quantity. There's medical screenings. There's less donor information than if you would know somebody, but there's still quite a bit that they provide. There's more legal protection, so there's no additional contracts required. You might want to consult a family law attorney just on the second parent adoption thing. But you can discuss this with a bank, but there's definitely more legal protection involved, as you can imagine. The donors to pick from. So when you log on to these different sites, tons of different sperm banks in this country and internationally, there's anywhere from 30 to 500 donors per bank. So when I started this process, I was thinking, oh, there's gonna be like pages and pages, and the bank that I ended up choosing, I think there was like 30, and I was like, oh, I kind of thought there was going to be this huge catalog, but it's not necessarily the case with every bank. A question I would get a lot going through this from friends was, oh, so do you have the sperm in your freezer? And I was like, no, it is cryogenically frozen, so it is kept at the bank. It's stored at the bank. You don't store it at your house. You don't have to worry about all of that. And then it is shipped on demand when needed. So the FDA does regulate banks, but they're primarily about safety protocols to prevent disease transmission, and they're not really related to factors that might come into play after a child is born. So, only the state of New York and California inspect the banks prior to licensing them. There is an accreditation organization for tissue banks, but I think opting into it is voluntary and it can be expensive. So maybe not every bank is even, accredited, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing. But there's just a wide variety of banks out there, and we'll go into that more. So let's see, let's keep going here. So with frozen sperm, we've got some pros and cons. Pros, it's washed, it's tested for quality. There is a medical screen. There's a variety of options. You got more legal protection. It's definitely easier for use at a traditional fertility clinic if that's where you might be conceiving. But also some fertility clinics allow, a known donor to come in, donate to the bank, and then use that eventually. Some of the cons are it's a tighter timeline because with frozen sperm, it doesn't live as long. So you've got to really time it specifically. And there's a higher cost involved, of course. And this is also a picture of the tiny little vial. So that's probably like the size of my pinky finger. And that is, you either get 1 or 2 per cycle, depending on if you would like to do it, one day and then a day after. And it's just so tiny. It comes in a really, really huge thing, but it's very tiny. So the types of insemination with frozen sperm, you can do ICI, which is what we talked about before, where it goes into the vagina. But if you'd like to get increased chances a little bit, IUI, which is intrauterine, is really the most common, and that's what we'll be talking about most. For this, you can only use washed sperm. If you were to have fresh sperm that's, unwashed, that could cause cramping and real discomfort if that is put through the cervix directly into the uterus. So that's why frozen sperm is the way to go for IUI and washed. And some banks do sell unwashed sperm. And so they say it's ICI ready. But with, washed sperm, you can use it, either ICI or IUI, but IUI is the more common one because it gets it closer because it's already in the uterus. IVF, of course, we've all heard of IVF. It's in vitro fertilization, so where the egg and the sperm are, put together and fertilized outside the body, and which is a lot more expensive, of course. You can do ICI and IUI at home assisted with a midwife, or you can do that at a traditional fertility clinic or hospital clinic. So really when thinking about this, it's helpful to think about what type of experience is important to you. Do you want to be at home? Do you want to be in a clinic? Do you want it to be just you and your partner? Do you want somebody who you have a relationship with to help you complete this process? Also what does your body require? But it can be really helpful to know that you have way more options than you think. So with IUI, what I've got pictured here is a speculum to go ahead and open the vaginal canal up, and then there's the needleless syringe, and then that is a catheter, that other long thing. And so you would connect that to the syringe, and that would be fed through the cervix into the uterus, and so that is where sperm would be deposited for IUI. And midwife, there are many midwives around the country who are trained in this. There are also midwives that you can consult if you don't have anybody in your area about this. And you can do this unassisted at home. It's really not talked about much at all, but that's absolutely an option you have. If you're consulting with somebody, especially on safety and sterility and all of that stuff. But it's an option to do it that way yourself at home. Okay. So if you're talking about doing at home, this is a picture of my nightstand when I went through this process with my previous partner. And so you want to gather your community, first of all, reach out to people. You can reach out to me, but there's tons of people on, Instagram and such who have gone through this process. Talk to your local midwives and see, has anybody had experience doing IUIs? Does anybody offer that for your community? Like I mentioned, there are midwives who, are located in different parts of the country that share this information on the internet, and you can have a consult with them, and they can help you figure this out. Also, try to connect with any other people or queer families, in your area to see if there's anybody who's done this before. it really, really helped talking this through with somebody who had done it before me. It's just invaluable to be able to talk to people and say, like, how did you do it? Like, how did you time it? And all this stuff. So this is a picture of what it would look like. Some supplies, if you were doing, you know, an at-home insemination for IUI or ICI. So, you know, I've got a needleless syringe, the catheter, you've got a speculum, which my previous partner and I had obtained from a local midwife who was, you know, consulting with us a little bit, which was great. Lube, a headlamp, which is really funny, but it's also very helpful to go ahead and see that cervix. Gloves, and then, you know, kind of ovulation prediction kits or stuff to track all the fertility is kind of the stuff going on in the background of this as well. But again, you know, it can be an intimate experience if that's what you are interested in, and that if that's what your body, you know, will allow, if your fertility is on track and all of that. So there's a lot of room for, you know, imagining what this scenario can look like for you. So I wanted to share this. I saw that Ray from Refuge Midwifery had shared this on Instagram a few weeks ago, I think, talking about fertility care versus infertility care. And I was like, yes, because this was kind of a discussion when my partner and I had been going through this. Was everybody was kind of equating, you know, friends and family would equate what we were trying to do and how we were trying to get pregnant with being infertile. And it was frustrating because that's not what this journey has to be about. You know, maybe your fertility and your ovulation and all that is perfectly healthy, but all you're lacking in is sperm. So it's really not the same thing. It's its own experience. There are some similar struggles to infertility for sure, but there's also some unique ones. And so I super appreciated seeing this. And so I'll just read. She writes, fertility care assumes that health, fertility, and well-being, and it's typically a good fit for folks who don't have a fertility issue and are just lacking sperm. They're seeking a lower intervention approach to conceiving a baby. In fertility care, we serve folks using known sperm donors and folks using a sperm bank to conceive with IUI. Sometimes folks with a cycle-related fertility issue will also seek out fertility care to support their conception goals with diet, lifestyle, cycle tracking, all of that stuff. And then infertility, of course, is defined as when you're trying to conceive for a year if you're under 35 and 6 months if you're over 35. So it can be a lot more invasive. If you're going to a traditional clinic, they might want to put you on what's known as a medicated cycle, even if you don't necessarily have any fertility issues going on, just because they are trying to maximize chances and maximize, or, you know, minimize the time, you know, that they spend with you in the fertility clinic. But there's another way, and midwives are a fabulous way to be able to access that. So I hope you can laugh with me at this photo. I thought it was fun to put in. So the cost associated with sperm banks. This is, of course, a big question that everybody has. So I'm going to run through it a little bit. So it totally varies by sperm bank, but in the catalogs that you browse, some of them are free to browse the online catalog. Sometimes there's a fee, you know, $50 or so to get access to the catalog. And then sometimes you can pay to see one person's profile, or sometimes when you pay, you get access to all the profiles. It's a little different. And the vials, which are the little things you saw before of sperm, can cost anywhere from $330 to $960 per vial. And then you can kind of multiply that by the time it might take you to get pregnant, you know, number of months. And then the number of children you might desire. So if you're trying to, if you are interested in having the same sperm donor for multiple children, that's something to consider. Some banks offer a discount if you buy, like, you know, 5 vials in bulk or something. And then you can also just go along and buy as you go. But keeping in mind, if having the same sperm donor is something important to you, thinking about like how much you might want to invest upfront for for a donor, because they can like sell out along the way. There's also about $100 to $200 per shipping cost each time. And then sometimes there's a long-term storage cost. So sometimes that's just included, you know, the bank will, you know, keep them for you for free, or then sometimes there's an extra cost associated with, like, okay, well, you bought 5 vials, and so it's going to be like $300, you know, to store that for the year. And then you've also got the cost of insemination. So, you know, whether you're doing ICI or IUI, could be free, or it could be, excuse me, as low as $150 or as high as a few $1,000s, kind of depending on if the, you know, medications are involved in if you're at a traditional fertility clinic where they're extra tracking, extra medications sort of thing. But if you're, you know, doing IUI at home with a midwife, if you're doing IUI at home by yourself, or even if you're doing IUI at a clinic and you don't require extra, you know, fertility drugs to kind of help ovulation happen, that can be on the lower end of things. And so it's so much more affordable than IVF. So I feel like a lot of people, you know, we mostly hear about IVF in our culture, but IUI is kind of like the middle ground that is not talked about as much. Also, something to keep in mind is that sometimes clinics will do 2 inseminations per cycle, like have you come in one day and then do it the next day. And that's also something you could do if you're doing it yourself or having a midwife help you at home. That's something to discuss with them on what you think, you know, your best chances are. I'll also say that something to look into, because cost was a huge concern for me throughout this, is that check it to see if there's any university, you know, kind of teaching hospitals in your area. They might be more affordable with IUIs than a traditional fertility clinic. So with unknown donors, something that's really neat to learn about is the donor sibling registry. So this is another website that connects donor families, and they've connected over 19,000 people. They connect to donor siblings, you know, from the same donor, and sometimes they are able to connect you to the donors as well. So you can kind of browse by clinic, donor number, and more. And also a lot of banks have their own version of this too. So once you buy sperm from somebody and conceive a child, then you can kind of have access to their personal, like, donor sibling registry. This is not something that everybody's interested in even pursuing for their family or for their future kids, but to other people, it can be super intriguing and interesting to be able to connect with donor siblings that your child might share. So that's something to consider, because kind of no matter, you know, if you use a sperm bank, they're guaranteed pretty much to have donor siblings. So that's something to think about as an option, but you also do not have to go even into looking into that if you choose not to for your family. So choosing a sperm bank, there's tons of different questions we can ask about it. These are 2 great ones, the Sperm Bank of California and Seattle Sperm Bank, but there are a fair amount in the US. So some of the stuff that we want to be thinking about is, you know, what information about the donor do they provide? Does the bank track outcomes? So that means, are they tracking if pregnancies are actually occurring from a certain donor? Do they set offspring or donor limits? So this was personally a big question for me, but there's actually no regulations that require sperm banks to limit the number of offspring per donor. So, you know, we've all seen the crazy movies and crazy articles that come out about, like, oh, you know, 150 kids were from this one sperm donor. And, you know, while I'm sure that's not super common, it also, like, is a possibility. And so, you know, the American Society of Reproductive Medicine recommends that there's no more than 25 offspring per, like, a certain population number. But since I think most of the US banks do ship internationally, excuse me, that also opens up things. So some donors have been found to have like 50 offspring. some more, you know, a lot less, of course. It's kind of based on how many years they donate. So each donation is split into multiple vials. So those tiny little vials that you saw, like there's tons of them per, you know, per donation. Also, there's not any, in the US, there's not any like central registration of sperm donors. So theoretically, the same guy could go to multiple banks to donate. And so, you know, they do get paid. So that's part of the motivation for people donating. You know, of course, there are many different reasons, but it tends to be younger college men who are looking for some extra cash, and also, you know, maybe want to help out families and such. But, you know, so there are some banks that do limit offspring. So, for example, the Sperm Bank of California limits each donor to no more than 10 families. And so it's just, and other banks will say, oh, we limit to 25 families, or we limit to 25 offspring. But limiting to families and offspring is also different. So maybe you limit to 25 families, but what if half of those families have 2 kids? So then it's, you know, then you're with 40 something, you know, 30 something possible donor siblings, or not. You know, there may not be a huge availability of the sperm. So that's something to discuss with each bank, and look on their website and see if they have anything about that. So also, you know, what's their screening process like for the people donating? Is there a refund policy? If you buy 5 vials and you get pregnant the first time and you only want 1 kid, can you return those vials? Again, they're the ones who are storing them, so it's not like you have them in your possession, but that can be something. You know, sometimes they'll buy them back at a certain percentage of the cost or whatnot. Do they ship sperm to a home if you're interested in doing at-home insemination? A lot of them will require like a doctor's note, but you can also absolutely, well, maybe not absolutely, but usually, you know, a midwife, you know, whether it's a certified professional midwife or a certified nurse midwife, can sign off on that kind of form for you, for them to be able to ship to a home. What's the ease and the speed of shipping? That's a question to ask. What's their reputation? Are they queer friendly if that's important to you? And then of course, the differences in cost. So choosing a sperm donor specifically, there's tons of options. It's really an interesting process. You know, you go through these online databases and you get to plug in what might be important to you and kind of see what comes out. So some of the things to consider are their personal health history, their family health history, physical characteristics, genetic testing that might be done, and genetic things that you might be looking out for to, you know, avoid because of what you might have in your family history. Racial, ethnic, religious background, education, current employment, photos. So the photos that they provide, usually baby photos, but some of them go to, you know, kid age. Some of them even do give like a recent photo, which is very interesting. And you would think with like the internet these days, they wouldn't be open to doing that, but some banks have like, you know, more recent photos. Their personality. So banks try to provide that with a few different ways, you know, through written interviews. Some of them even have audio interviews where a person from the sperm bank is interviewing them, so you can hear their voice. And that was something that was intriguing to me throughout this process, because I feel like you can learn a lot about somebody through their voice maybe. So, you know, it just gives you a little bit of insight to someone, but not all the banks have that. Some of them also provide staff impressions of the donor. So, I mean, you know, frankly, it's not like they're going to like trash talk these people, but they might be able to give you like a little bit of a sense in differentiating what type of people they are. Like, oh, this person's, you know, seems really smart and cerebral, or this person is, you know, a big goof, you know, and so those might be ways to get a little bit better of a picture about somebody. So yeah, again, just thinking about what's important to you and a partner. You know, you get about like a 30-page packet with all this info when you like get, you know, on one donor. And then some, you know, like I said, sometimes you get access to all to every donor, you know, the 30 pages or whatever, but sometimes it's like, okay, this one seems interesting. I see like the cursory information, and then you pay and you can get like the 30 something page packet with all of this information. So, you know, have fun thinking about like what can be and what's important to you and who you choose. So this is kind of an example of what searching one of the catalogs looks like. So on the right, you know, you can see, is it somebody that has baby photos? Is it somebody that has previous pregnancies? You can search by ancestry, you can search by eye color, you can search by all this stuff. And then this is kind of like a little bit of, you know, what you get with the cursory information, like when you're looking through. So here's a sample donor profiles. So this is, you know, part of that like super long packet that you receive. So there's tons of information that they are sharing. And again, you know, like I said before, with known donors requires trust. Same with unknown donors. You know, you're trusting that they are providing accurate information, of course. And so, you know, some of the stuff on here, it gets real intricate. You know, it talks about their educational background, their skin characteristics, and then there's like personality stuff. You know, there's silly questions like, you know, what's your favorite color? Like, you know, where would you like to travel and why? Can you describe your personality? So, you know, it's all designed to just like give you a little bit more of a well-rounded picture besides just the kind of like bio data of people. On the left here is one of the charts that they fill out. They give medical information about themselves, their parents, any siblings, grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, all that stuff. So it can be pretty comprehensive, and you can go through and look like, oh, okay, there's, you know, heart issues on this side. Oh, I have heart issues in my family. This might not be a good donor match, you know, something like that. You know, what mental health issues might be in their family, all this stuff, tons and tons of stuff. And then you've got handwritten, some of them have handwritten notes, and that can be kind of interesting to see their handwriting. And so they also have, you know, donor essays, and a lot of the banks do ask, you know, why do you want to be a donor? So that, I always found that to be an interesting question to see the answer to for them. And so, yeah, again, all of this is just giving you a little bit more of a picture of who the type of person is. And, you know, that may, you know, personality and all that, that might not even be important to somebody, you know, like everybody has different priorities and reasons for picking the donor that they do. And so, you know, personality may not factor in too much into that. It's just different for everyone. So again, with this, you know, it's thinking about what's important to you. And this is the, you know, Reproductive Futurism conference. So one of the most empowering things about this process is that we have so much choice when going through this process. You know, it can be scary and confusing in the beginning, but there's a lot of options. You have a lot of options for where you want it to take place and how you want that to feel. And you also have a lot of options as far as how you want to, you know, create a baby. And it's great to be able to have the freedom to like lean into the possibilities that are available to you. It's not just you can put, I don't know, you can put a lot of thought into it if you would like to. And that's kind of exciting. And so here are some resources. This is definitely not exhaustive. This is just a few websites and you know, Instagram accounts that I found to be helpful in talking about this stuff. Some of this info was it was great to find on the there's a website called choicemoms.org, and they have a sperm guide that kind of talks about some of this stuff a little bit more in depth. But I've got some midwives listed down here and some other sites. So that's it. And yeah, I see that there's some questions and stuff.
Wonderful. I learned so much.
Awesome.
Let's see. Wanna make sure we can both see us. Standard. All right. Wondering if you're aware of any laws that prohibit turkey-based insemination with a known donor. And then someone commented, it varies state by state. I know in Georgia it's illegal, quote unquote, but the only time it becomes a problem is with second adoption.
Right. So it's not like anybody would particularly know until a second adoption thing might pop up. So that's kind of, it does vary state by state. I don't know that it's necessarily illegal, but I think it might be complicated with listing parents for the child if a second parent adoption pops up. So that's why putting a contract in place with a lawyer can be helpful, but that's state by state. It really does vary, so that can be something to think about. And also, well documenting exactly what you're doing can be helpful, if you go down the second parent adoption route.
Why would unwashed sperm cause irritation? Curious how it's different than penis and vagina intercourse that results in contraception in terms of discomfort.
Yeah, the only reason it would be irritating is if it's if you do IUI, which is when the catheter is threaded through the cervix directly into the uterus, because with penis and vagina, like the sperm is going to swim up there by itself and it's not carrying all the rest of the fluid with it. You know what I mean? It's crossing the cervix by itself. But if you were to shoot up unwashed sperm through the cervix directly into the uterus, that's when it's like a problem. So yeah, if you're just putting it in the vagina, yeah, totally.
Is it like bacteria and stuff like that will cause irritation?
Yeah, I don't know if it's bacteria or just the rest of the seminal fluid is like not meant to go like through the cervix. Do you know what I mean? Like,
got it.
Yeah, so just with IUI, that's the concern.
Is it possible to have known donor sperm, quote unquote, washed so the IUI can be done? What would that process look like?
Yeah, so you can look up like fertility clinics or sperm banks near you, and you can have your known donor go ahead and go in and like donate to them, and they can like process and all that. So that is an option at certain areas. It will probably then be frozen, but yes, you can have like a known donor go into somewhere and have them store it for you.
Can you speak to what kind of questions or conversation people should have before a known donor that is a friend?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, as you can imagine, it's quite a big conversation to have. That's how my previous partner and I had started out doing things, and it didn't work out with that person in the end. Although we did do one cycle with them. And it was a very interesting process of conversation. We talked about, I think mainly the biggest concern was level of involvement with the kid. And what is that going to look like? What do they want it to look like? What do we want it to look like? If a concern arises with the kid, are they going to, if they're involved, it's kind of like maybe an uncle type figure, are they going to have any say? And if there's a medical emergency with kid, or if there's just a parenting decision, it's a lot of.
Could you include those in contracts?
Yeah, I mean, somewhat, like you can say like, I will never, part of the contract was like, I'm never gonna require, money from you, and you're never gonna require responsibility from me, sort of thing. That sort of thing is laid out. But as far as like, I don't know, the family law attorney could speak a little more to like how much is really like worth it to put in the contract, but like mainly the conversation around boundaries and what that's gonna look like for you. There's a great, maybe I think 2 episodes of the Longest Shortest Time podcast that talk about this family who used a known donor, and it's super interesting. And if anybody's interested, I can find that for them and send that along. And it talks about like how it's going with parenting and stuff, and having this, you know, other person be involved in the kids' lives a little bit. But yeah, you know, talking about boundaries, talking about what do they envision it looking like. It's a big conversation, and it's an ongoing conversation, of course, but also building trust with that person.
Can you paste the resources in the chat? This is also recorded, so I guess you can also get it that way, but I don't know if you can copy and paste it.
I can try. Can you still see my PowerPoint?
Yeah, you can stop sharing your screen if you like.
Okay. All right, so I can go ahead and try to copy and paste. And yeah, if I'm able to find that podcast episode, I can do that at some point. Okay, I'm gonna drop a image of the resources in there. Maybe not.
I don't know. I don't think I've ever seen images in the
Can't
chat
do it?
box.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How about you send me the screenshot in my DMs, and I can repost it that way.
Okay. Yeah, great. I'll do that.
Can you speak to adverse effects of the chemicals used for washed sperm?
I can't. I don't know a lot about that. I haven't heard any concerns about that, but of course that's something you should explore and look into more. I would find a midwife who's done IUIs, and you know, even if they're just, you know, not in your area, just if you connect with them through social media somehow and ask them about that. That's a good question. Sorry, I can't hear you.
About how many folks conceive with IUI versus other methods?
IUI, you know, there's increased chances rather than the ICI because again, the sperm is closer up in there. I don't know the exact percentages. I think when you look, you know, and some of the banks list this, it sounds pretty dismal, but then again, isn't every pregnancy, you know, kind of hard to happen in the end anyway. So the statistics I think are a little scary when I had looked at it, but I know people who this has worked for, like I know success stories. It's definitely, you know, the midwives who are out here doing this are, you know, having success with it as well. So it's absolutely, absolutely possible to be
I would
done.
imagine if you're a FAM, your fertility awareness method can be really helpful with this as well. If
Super
you really
helpful.
know your body.
Yeah. Fertility tracking and getting the right window is so key to all of this. And so, yeah, there's a lot of knowledge that goes into that and knowing your own body. And so, you know, if you want to do that by yourself, if you want to have some, you know, either a fertility specialist or a midwife help you understand all that and track all that, that can also be super helpful.
And so if you said this, but how do folks find good family law attorneys?
I would look for somebody who's, hold on, I'm still doing this. Thanks. Okay. And so I would look for somebody who specifically works with LGBTQ second parent adoptions, and then find somebody that way. They may not have done like a, you know, a donor contract before, but they can certainly figure that out. But I would kind of start with looking for family law, and then start with, you know, second parent adoption, queer friendly, and go from there.
And then share who you find with the community.
Yeah, share who you find with everybody. Yes, yes.
Last question. Oh, there was a comment. There are good resources in Colorado for family law called Elephant Circle. Yeah, Elephant Circle is national, I think. I know they're based in Colorado, but think
Awesome.
helpful. And Indra Lucerio works nationwide. She works with, or they work with Elephant Circle.
Awesome. This is great. Crowdsourcing.
Yes. Any other questions? If not, then this was really, really helpful.
Good.
Woman
Yes,
Body is a great info for second parent adoption. Yeah, I love Woven Bodies. Her name is skipping me right now.
Morgan or Morgan?
Morgan. Yeah, Morgan Richardson. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I followed their whole journey, and that was super helpful in learning about second parent adoptions. And because I know in New York the laws were different than where I was, and yeah, it just state by state is very.
Yeah, follow them on Instagram. I think they shared their journey and what it was looking like as well.
Yeah, Doula Morgan with an E at the end was her handle, and then yeah, Woven Bodies as well.
Well, thank you so much, Jillian. This was wonderful. This workshop is recorded, so if you didn't get all the information now, you'd be able to rewatch it once it's live.
Awesome.
How can folks contact you again?
So on Instagram, I'm Jillian C. Lopina. If you want to email me, jillian.lopina@gmail. And yeah, I'm around to chat with anybody. I love sharing this info. So yeah, thank you.
Sounds good. Well, have a great evening.
Thank you. You too.
Peace.